Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. I have just a few ticks before 12:05. Oh, there, 12:05 just turned over. So we'll go ahead and get started today. Welcome to the May edition of the Northwest Gas Association's monthly webinar series. We look forward to this presentation from Xing Hanxing Wang. He goes by the first name of Xing. And we're really looking forward to it, talking about GTI Energy's Veritas program. He'll explain exactly what it is. I took 5 minutes of his time beforehand to try to get a clear sense. I really didn't need to do that because he's going to spend about 20 or 25 minutes with us here now, telling me exactly what that is. So the good news is you Northwest Natural folks, who are all that we have on the call, we've got a really small group, so I'm gonna let you come off mute. And normally I don't do this. If there's background noise where you're at, go ahead and stay on mute. But saying, if it's okay, would you mind if folks had questions, if they just sort of popped a hand up and asked them as they come up, kind of pop a hand up. You all know how to do that by now in Zoom, right? And I think we can do that, right?
Absolutely. That sounds really good. I'd rather have it interactive than just one way.
Yeah. So normally when we have 30 or 35 people on the call, we like to keep everybody muted and ask them to interact through the chat, but we'll do it this way instead. And I do, before I turn it over to you, Han, if you want to go ahead and load up your your presentation now, the screen is yours to share. But I do want to talk just briefly about what's coming up. We've got a good lineup of webinars coming up, including on June 16th. We're going to have Robert Wigging, who is the president and chief technology officer of STARS Hydrogen. It's a company in the Tri-Cities of Washington State, Richland, Washington, that is developing a hydrogen on the gas system hydrogen development, production appliance, basically, for lack of a better word. It uses a chemical reaction instead of a thermal reaction like electrolysis. I'm probably getting that all wrong. It does not use electrolysis. Let me put it that way. It's a chemical reaction to produce hydrogen. It's an appliance that sits right on a gas pipeline system and produces hydrogen using natural gas as the feedstock. I believe it captures the carbon too in that process. And so it can deliver hydrogen right off the pipeline system to uses that may want it right there. So that's exciting. That's a innovative technology born right here in the Northwest. In July, I'll be presenting the latest version of our Northwest Gas Market Outlook study. That's live today, by the way. We're doing a soft launch. You can go to our website, and actually it'll be live tomorrow. I'm sorry, not today. It's not live today, but the next couple of days, you're welcome to go to our website, click on Outlook on our website, the Outlook tab, and it'll show up as the 2021 Outlook. And then we skip August because most people like to take August off, and then we'll go into September. And we've got home builder associations from Washington and Oregon who've agreed to come and talk to us about affordable housing and energy policy, where the two conflict and how they can help each other or not, or harm. So those are our presentations coming up, and we look forward to those. As I say, usually we have participants muted for the webinar. We ask you to use the chat feature to ask your questions. We're going to go ahead and just let you do that live today. And then Xing has graciously agreed to make his slides available after the presentation. We'll also have a recording up on our YouTube channel of this presentation. It is being recorded. So with that, Xing, I'm going to hand it all over to you. And we really look forward to hearing about GTI Energy's Veritas program.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you for that. So my name is Hanxing Wang. You can call me Xing. A little bit about me before we get started. I'm Deputy Director of Veritas. I've just joined GTI Energy as a senior analyst in their energy transitions team, which sits under strategy and innovation. I'm an engineer with background. I spent 6 years chemical engineer with BP in operations and project development before doing graduate school at policy school in Colombia, and then did some policy work before joining GTI Energy. And so I'm only about 2 months into GTI Energy, and my main focus is really helping to build out this Veritas program and help manage it. Today, I'm here to talk to you about Veritas, a GTI Energy methane emissions measurement and verification initiative. The agenda of today is we'll go over a little bit about, what GTI Energy is, if this is the first time you've heard of it, what we do, what problem that Veritas is trying to sort of address, what it is, and where we are in terms of the development stage. And then I'm sure, and this is something that Dan asked in the very beginning, was, how does Veritas fit into the wider sort of natural gas landscape for certifications, for standards, performance standards, which Veritas is not sort of competing with. It's absolutely just sort of a sort of fundamental building block that complements those initiatives. And so, it's a small group. So if you have questions, please do use the chat function or just interrupt me. I don't mind. I'd rather this be interactive than just me speaking for nonstop for 20 minutes. Without further ado, GTI, and everyone can see my screen okay?
Yes, it's coming up 5 by 5 on my end.
Great. So who is GTI Energy? We've just gone through an update of our brand and the name to really sort of encompass the fact that we are building on our legacy natural gas systems to build out capabilities and expertise in other sectors. But we're a leading energy research and training organization. They're based in Des Plaines, Chicago, and we really developed solutions for the energy transition, encompassing things like methane emissions, hydrogen, and we have expertise and lots of scientists and engineers, and really have strong relationships with both industry and regulators. We do a lot of scientific research for the DOE. A lot of this is also kind of about delivering innovation and testing out new technologies and coming up with ways that really accelerate the energy transition. Specifically about our strategy, we envision a low carbon, low cost integrated energy system, which leverages gases, liquids, efficiency, and infrastructure. What this means is that we're just involved in a lot of different things. And Veritas really falls underneath our wider methane emissions mitigation solutions program. But we do things, as I said before, in hydrogen, renewable gas, building out a data and digitalization program, and a little bit about gas of value. So encompassing lots of different things across the industry. Our methane emission strategy at GTI Energy is really about demonstrating scalable solutions that can accelerate and increase the effectiveness of operational efforts that reduce methane emissions from natural gas systems this decade. This decade, because we know that the timeline to 2030 is really important for any attempt to limit global warming by 2050, and methane emissions, the focus on it is because it's 80 times worse as a global warming gas than CO2 over a 20-year period. And it's also something that we know as an industry, that's something that we really have a lot of control over, because a lot of it comes from the leaks or fugitive emissions that we have. And so we're really about developing and validating new technologies and operational practices. This is about testing out new sensing or finding out new approaches that really can build and scale new approaches that accelerate methane emissions reduction and detection. And this means we can also then gather critical data to really help build a picture of market drivers. Veritas is what I'm here to talk to you about, but we're also involved in things like Project Astra, which is led by University of Texas, Austin, which is about deploying a new sensor-based sort of network that gives real-time data and allows companies to really respond quickly to methane leaks and to detecting leaks and repairing them quickly, so that it's cost effective for both large and small operators. and we have a really purpose-driven mission, and with our capabilities, we want to leverage that and really build broad networks that can drive change. And so where Veritas fits in, it's about trying to build a transparent, consistent approach to measuring methane emissions. This is a this decade opportunity to really address climate change. And at the same time, there's lots of new technologies and solutions that are continuing to be developed. And Veritas is technology neutral because we know that that landscape for what can be detected and what will be deployed and what's the most cost-effective way of doing this is going to keep developing. But what the market still lacks is a way of trusting the methodology for assessing the effectiveness of these technologies and trusting the methane emissions numbers behind it. And so Veritas is a way, it's a methodology that provides consistent, credible assessment of methane intensity. It allows us to then address that gap and build something that we think is lacking in the market. What actually is Veritas? It's essentially a methodology built of 5 different technical protocols. We have the methane intensity protocol that defines it by segment, and the measurement protocol of how to measure your emissions, the reconciliation protocol that's about reconciling your inventory with actual measurements and trying to build the understanding of reconciling the bottom ups versus top down emissions that you get, and then supply chain summations about how you add those across the segments, and an audit insurance protocol, which is still being developed about verifying the companies that are using Veritas. How do you know that they're doing the protocols correctly and appropriately? And we cover 6 segments of the natural gas supply chain: production, gathering and boosting, processing, transmission and storage. Dan, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Ing. So I just want to have a clear understanding here. So what I'm hearing you say is if producer A follows these 5 technical protocols, they will produce a number for each of those protocols, so whatever the number is, right? So a methane intensity number.
The aim is to produce one methane intensity number that follows these protocols.
Okay, so there's 4 protocols for producing the methane intensity, and the methane intensity protocol is how you do measurement, reconciliation, supply chain summation, and audit insurance, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you follow these protocols, producer A is going to come up with a methane intensity number, and producer C is going to follow the same protocols and come up with another methane intensity number. And what you can be sure, so there's no standard. You're not saying, Veritas is not saying the methane intensity number should be X.
We're not performing standard. It's just a methodology for producing that number, so that company X and Y, in this example, you can be sure that they're following the scope and methodology for coming up with the methane intensity number will be majority measurement based, and that they're doing similar things to come up with that number so that you can compare them.
Yeah, okay. So you got a reasonable way of saying this is an apples to apples comparison between producer A and producer C.
Yeah.
But there's no judgment about whether producer A's number, I mean, it's obviously if the methane intensity is lower, it will be better, right? But you're not establishing a standard, just a process, really. Yeah. Methodology. I like that phrase. Okay, thank you.
And also, I should have been clear as well. I'm not a technical person. But I, as an engineer, so this is not a briefing to get into the details of the protocols, if this is what it is about, but it's to give you an overview of Veritas and what it's trying to address, and where we are at the moment.
I think we're on the right path here.
Perfect.
So let me just interrupt really quickly,
sure.
And just ask Mike, Tom, Andy, Kevin, any questions at this stage of the game? It's early, but just want to give you a second or two to unmute. Andy looks like he unmuted.
Yeah.
Go
This
ahead.
is Andy. I'm just Northwest Natural, and just let you know, I'm actually on the OTD team, and I'm aware of Veritas, at a high level, and very, very interesting. I think we didn't opt into it, just so you know, just because I think a lot of the other requirements to gather a lot of the data and some of the other things needed to be done. We're just not quite there yet, but I think we'd like to be. So just a little bit of context, but no,
That's
so
great,
far so
Andy.
good.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds good. And so where we are now with Veritas is we have 20 sponsor organizations, and next slide will tell you who those are. We've drafted the protocols for all these protocols of methane intensity measurement, reconciliation, supply chain summation. We're currently developing the audit and assurance one at the moment, but the first drafts for all these, for the first 4 have been done, and we're actually testing them out in 15 demonstration projects that are covering all 6 segments. And this is primarily run by the sponsor companies. They pick the site that they want to do it. And this is all about making sure that the protocols that we have are fit for purpose. We incorporate the learnings, what's not working or what hasn't been addressed yet. And really trying to get that sort of first pilot phase out, and before we release it publicly, which is on schedule at the end of the year. So the whole aim of Veritas is also part of it is transparency. So having the protocols released publicly is key to sort of building trust in what the methodology is. And the development of these protocols, to highlight, is that it's been reviewed by an independent panel of experts. And this is comprised of, real stars in the field like Adam Brandt, Bob Kleinberg, Jovan Fisher, and also with the input from the organizations that have sponsored, so that there has been industry input. There has been sort of key input from methane experts, really, and though their feedback that's been completely sort of open, and they've been able to provide as many comments as they want, and we've really incorporated them in. The next slide is about these are organizations that have been really key to getting Veritas off the ground, and they believe in it. So 20 foundation sponsors across the natural gas supply chain. Pioneer and Chevron have just joined recently, and actually I think both are taking part in demo projects. Really key to the success of Veritas is it's having the companies adopt this and believe in that we need to have this sort of standardized methodology that then external stakeholders can really trust the methane emissions numbers. In terms of the timeline, as I said, all the protocols for the segments for measurement and reconciliation have been complete. We've completed the sort of the first round of expert panel feedback. We've kicked off demonstration projects for all segments, and companies that do join, there's still time for them to take part in demonstration projects and really getting to input at this early development stage for the protocols. We aim to have that complete in September. At the same time, we've also opened up a period for vendors, so like the satellite providers, the methane detection technology providers, to have an opportunity to see the protocols and comment into specific protocols that they're specifically targeting in terms of the segment of the industry. And then come September, we hope to incorporate all the feedback from both the vendor feedback period and the demo projects, and then have another round of technical and sponsor review revisions before really opening up to sort of a public comment period where we'll invite additional stakeholders to have a chance to look at the protocols and comment on them for being going to come to the end of the year and releasing them to the public. Concurrently to this sort of development timeline for the protocols, we're at the moment going to start ramping up our outreach to regulators and financial stakeholders, because that's what we think is key to really building the need for Veritas. And just to be clear, GTI Energy is not a policy advocacy. Key to Veritas is that we're not advocating for any regulations, additional or whatever there is in the moment. It's about really educating them on what Veritas is trying to address, this key market gap that at the moment, if you look at producer A, producer C, the methane emissions numbers, the way that they're doing it is primarily first based on like emission factors, which we know and studies have shown that they can be vastly underestimating the emissions, and also the methodology behind them is maybe different between the two. And we're trying to just try to set this transparent, standardized way of saying these are the methane emission numbers of these two, and you can compare apples to apples. We have, and there's interest, in showing this to DOE is also key to, the U.S. gas market. We've been in communication with the State Department, and given the need for increased gas, if we have to be transparent about the methane emissions that's coming from the sector, and financial institutions, this is all about the need for additional ESG data or what's key to a successful ESG strategy. A lot of the pressure from investors on increased information, not only in terms of quantity, but the quality of the data. There's lots of greenhouse gas numbers and methane numbers. We're trying to fulfill this key niche of methane emissions because that is at the moment key to this decade and something that we know the industry can really get a handle on. And with OGMP 2.0 and methane guiding principles, this brings us to the last section of the presentation, which is about where does Veritas fit within this ecosystem of volunteer initiatives. We aren't trying to like reinvent the wheel. There's lots of other initiatives that are out there. And so this is sort of a key slide to sort of define what Veritas is and isn't. It's a methodology, it's technology neutral, and it's a protocol for trying to calculate methane emissions, but we aren't setting a standard. We aren't trying to create new source-specific emission factors. We aren't about labeling for differentiated gas or developing a regulatory strategy. It's, the hope is that Veritas is adopted by other certificate agencies to say that if you're using Veritas, maybe you'll meet whatever standard there is. But we see this as like a fundamental building block for the industry to get trust in this number that companies, investors, regulators are really focused on. And included in this is sort of like a comparison of what Veritas is compared to One Future. MIQ is a sponsor of Veritas too, or like how it ties in with OGMP 2.0 and GSI. And so this detail will be provided in the slide deck that we share later on too. So having said that, are there any additional questions? It's a lot of information there, but yeah.
Zing, can you come back to that previous slide? So these are entities, for instance, so just curious, why is Project Canary something different than all of these other things?
We just get a lot of questions from operators about how Veritas fits into this. And what we're trying to show with this is that, there isn't at the moment, methodology that industry of company operators all use, and that is also a measurement-based approach. Veritas largely builds off NGSI, but it adds on the LNG sector, and whereas NGSI is focused mostly on emission factors, we are saying that majority of the number that you produce should be measurement-based, because we know those emission factors, can significantly underestimate the emissions that you're getting, and that you need to sort of have both and have some trust in that number that you're going to produce.
Okay. Other questions for Zing? You got them all to yourselves, Northwest Natural folks, you sure? Well, okay. This is super helpful, Zing. Just understanding, and when you say a basic building block, to me, the way I characterize that in lay terms is Veritas is the methodology by which these other people can do what they're doing.
Absolutely, because and that's you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what we're trying to build.
Okay, one last chance for questions. All right.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. It was a
Oh,
pleasure.
sorry, I was on mute.
Oh,
Just
okay,
one
go
more
ahead,
question.
Kevin. Yeah.
As far as the measurements go, this is all sorts of measurements, right? So are we talking satellites? Are we talking on the ground
Yeah.
sensors? What's the pathway there?
So Veritas is technology neutral. We understand that, all those technology that you can use, satellite, ground-based sensors, fixed point sensors, they're all going to develop in the future, but that they all also have their pros and cons. And so what Veritas, the sort of the steps it tries to go through is to, show that if you are using a certain technology, that it meets the criteria that is built in within the measurement protocol. And it doesn't dictate what you should be using. So it's sort of like if you're measuring, if you're using technology and it picks up this methane emissions, is it within your inventory already, or is it not? And that's sort of like the details of the technical protocols that's been developed.
Gotcha. And is this intended to be like a ANSI style standard at some point, or what's the deal there?
No, we aren't. I don't think we're heading that direction. I think the protocols will be continuing to be owned by GT Energy and updated, and so we would be like the custodians of the protocols. But in terms of the what sort of audit or is that where it's coming from? This question of like who? Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't. I think if ANSI wants to learn about this and build it in within themselves, that's fine. But we aren't like trying to say there has to be a new standard or a new regulation. We're building this building block, and we're happy to like show that this is what it is and what's working. And I think we'll also do that in partnership with the companies that are doing this to see what's useful for them going forward, because it's about building transparency.
gotcha. Cool.
Thanks for that question.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but relating to Kevin's question, the Veritas would be a common methodology by which an ANSI standard might be developed.
That's yeah, exactly. But we aren't like specifically pushing for an ANSI standard at the moment, or any sort of new standard.
If you're going to come up with a standard, can everybody agree that this is how you get there? Whatever the number is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how
Cool.
would you, this is Andy, how would you kind of compare and contrast Veritas with One Future?
I don't think I can answer that question. I mean, apart from what's on the table, I don't know One Future that well. Most of the questions we get about from companies is about OGMP 2.0 and how how Veritas fits in with that. But that is a question I can get back to you if that's of interest.
Let me spitball on that a little bit, Andy. I wonder
Sure.
if so One Future says if you participate in One Future, you are establishing a goal of reducing your operations emissions to less than 1% of methane transported, produced, depending on who you are, right? That's One Future, right? Am I getting that part right, Andy?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Okay. So they don't, so Veritas doesn't say it's 1%. They say, and it's up to each One Future member to report its emissions to subpart W, however they interpret, or with using whatever methodology they come up with to report their emissions through subpart W, which then One Future aggregates and says, as a group, One Future is at 0.28. I think that is even the number, I'm just guessing, but 0.28% of methane again, of methane emissions, of total methane produced, transported, whatever, according to the number. As a group, they're well below their goal of 1%. What Veritas would do is say, okay, instead of you XYZ, let's call it Williams Company, another Northwest Gas Association member, or Northwest Natural, another gas association member and member of One Future. Instead of saying, well, One Future already has its goal, but how are you reporting? What's the methodology you use to get to the number you're reporting into subpart W to that then yields that other number? And if Williams is doing it the same way Northwest Natural is doing it, then you have a way of saying, well, these are apples to apples comparisons. It could be different systems, right? I mean, it's not a judgment. So Williams has a pipeline system. Northwest Natural operates a distribution system by and large. Different systems could be expected to come up with different methane intensity numbers that they're reporting. But if they're using the same methodology to get there, you can at least say, okay, well, everybody's going through the XYZ steps to get at whatever the number is. Today, that's not the case, right? Every One Future member uses its own methodology to report whatever its number is. So Veritas is that common protocol, that common methodology that you might use so that there is a common comparison as the number is generated through that methodology.
Yeah, and from what we've done,
saying
No, that's absolutely correct, and thank you for saving me there. But that's absolutely the way we're doing this. And also, One Future and Williams are actually sponsors of Veritas. Williams is doing a demo project on this too.
So did that answer your question, Andy? Or
it does, yeah. And we've been a part of One Future here for I guess this is going on our 3rd year. And yeah, you basically take all your facilities that you're currently reporting your subpart W, and then you add some other data fields that they've I guess the team has agreed upon to supplement that, and it's a little bit more refined. But you're right, it's kind of takes that high level reporting, augments it a bit, and then trues it up across the board. And as I understand Veritas, the other thing it does is again, just kind of sets a stage for a common methodology and approach, but also it's not just a top down, it's also like a bottom up, and there's some reconciliation. I mean,
yes.
So, and I think that's which is great. I think that's just when it comes to the bottom up part of it and data gathering and then getting that all aligned, that's where I think we'll get there. We're just not there yet versus maybe some other companies that have joined on board. So.
Absolutely. Really great questions.